Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. We got Big E, we got AJ, we got Rudolph coming to you live a little bit later in the show. We'll be joined by Avalanche legend Adam Foote. But for starters, we just got the three of us to talk a little bit. We'll talk Adam Foote's realm of, I'd call him a defensive defenseman. I know some people underrate his offense sometimes, I think, but I think he falls into that category. Before that, the tiniest bit of Avs news that isn't even really Avs news anymore, I suppose, but just something I found funny is the news that Mikko Rantanen had to pay an 85,000 euro fine because not because he didn't show up for his military service in Finland, which, by the way, required military service for everybody in Finland, but he sent in an extension last offseason, but it showed up a day late. So he was technically AWOL from the Finnish military for a day. So I hope, those $7 extra he got by being in a tax-free area helped him out with that fine or something. Made up the difference for him.
It's funny. When the Avs drafted him and he came to his first training camp, I asked him when he was planning on doing his military service, because it used to be a bigger deal before Finland made a bunch of changes that allowed it to be much easier for pro athletes to do their service. And he was like, I don't know. I'm not even thinking about it. And it does not appear that he has thought much about it since then. 10 years later.
It's not like back then. Back then, it's a little more strict, I believe, right? They're a little more severe in some parts of European countries for some players. I remember that. It was a big deal. So I'm not too familiar with how it works, but it's kind of funny, And like you said, it's just a chunk of change, right? You know what I mean? For what it is, and we'll see. I don't think it's going to make a big deal.
I don't know. I'd be upset. 85,000 euros for a day late, like 85,000 euros because he forgot about it entirely, or he actually was AWOL, something like that. Like a day late cost him 85,000 euros. I'd be upset.
I'd be late. Don't be late.
I think he'll be fine. I think he's got enough cash. That's not going to do too much to him. But yeah, sure. Not the first time Mikko can write an angry letter, although it's usually to the NHL about fines instead of his military. But, whatever it is. Anyway, we can shift into our first topic of the day, which I want to maybe not rank, but loosely talk about the best defensive defenseman in Avalanche history. But I want to start by defining that, right? Because you could make a fairly cogent argument that the best defensively effective defenseman in Avalanche history is Cale Makar, because a good offense is a good defense, right? If you have the puck, the other team doesn't have the puck and is shooting the puck on your net. So one, I think there's an argument there. Do we want to define what a defensive D is to eliminate some of those guys? And then two, we can start with that first question, but the second question may be more of a, what is a defensive defenseman as it has evolved over the 30 years of the Avs existence?
Wait, what do?
Yeah, I mean, I think cut off some of the obvious Cale Makar, Sandis Ozolinsh, Tyson Barrie, John Michael Lyles, like the puck movers that we know weren't great in their own end.
Yeah.
So focusing primarily on the guys that excelled in protecting the cage.
Okay, I'm good with that. At very least, played in their own zone.
No, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And you got to be, it's a guy that is able to identify, loose opposition players around. It's got to be someone that's able to identify their assignment quickly. You know what I mean? So I think that's what a defensive defenseman is. You know what I mean? And it's somebody that can play big minutes against top-end guys, right? Easy to be good defensively playing against fourth liners, right? You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it is what it is, But when you're playing the heavy minutes, and I call that lots of taxi, you know what I mean? Like, it's a different game. So I think we're on the same page here on what is a defensive defenseman.
I think generally that's true, but how do you guys kind of follow the path of the evolution of a defensive D? Because don't get me wrong, I love Adam Foote. Can't wait to talk to him in a little bit. But if you tried to play like Adam Foote today, you'd end up with 20 penalty minutes for clutching and grabbing everything in sight.
Per period.
The thing about Foote was that he was such an underrated skater that would absolutely play in today's game. He would have to alter some of the
play a different way.
But that guy's edges were awesome. Yeah, he was so good on his feet. We're not talking about like the Darian Hatch or Richard Matvichuk that had to like physically assault you to be effective defensively type of guy here. He was so good with the skates and an underrated guy with the puck that I think he'd be fine today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, I think you evolve. It's the cross-checking was more allowed back then. The clutching, the grabbing was more allowed, obviously. But you're right. As far as the skating, as far as the puck moving, you know what I mean? It's just that he brought so much more, you know what I mean, of the physicality and the blocking shots and the leadership that, I think you forgot, about the other parts, you know what I mean? And he can tell you at some point, he's playing a lot of second power play units, and, I think he wanted more too. He wanted to be more on the play because I think it was part of his game too. You know what I mean? But you can't just do it all, right? There's only one Cale Makar, and then all of a sudden it would affect parts of your other parts of your game. So only Cale Makar is a unicorn. But Foote, when you're talking about physicality and toughness and nastiness, like, boy, it didn't get much better than that.
There's no doubt
Yeah.
Foote would grind just about anybody out in the corner if that's what you're asking of a guy. So definitely deserves a lot of credit there. I like I said, we don't need to necessarily rank them like 1 to 5 or whatever. But if you're looking for defensive D that stand out over the years, obviously Adam Foote and Avs 1.0 is that guy. I don't know where you would necessarily Rob Blake. Does he qualify as a defensive D? Maybe a guy that falls a little bit into that all around Cale Makar category in a lot of ways too. You could go with some other guys. You get into the darker era of the Avs. How does a guy like a Carlos Grashjans fall into those categories? Unbelievable shot blocker. Does that make you
good?
A D? Yeah, right. So.
He was good, man.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, scratch right away in my head. Scratch. One of the most underrated trades we've ever made. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of and what a good guy, what a good dude, man, what a good dude. And he played hard. He didn't miss games. He played hard. He did all the things that are not flashy, and 100% he's top 5 for me. You know what I mean? Like I probably have him at 2. That just I think Foote's in a class of his own. That's why his jersey's in the rafters. But I think Scratch would be at 2. That's me. Carlos Grashjans, good dude.
Yep. It's tough because I think there's a couple of different angles. Foote, I do think, does get a pretty big jump up the list, as you mentioned. He's the only guy on this list who's captain the Avs, so that does a good bit for him as well. There's that other side of the game than just being out on the ice. But if I'm rounding out my top 5, whether you want Blake in there or not, fair enough. But you also had certainly Devon Taves in the modern era. And then you kind of get this bundle of other guys. Eric Johnson maybe deserves to be on that list. If you're looking at some of the darker ages, maybe someone like a Jan Haefele.
Jan Haefele, man. I forgot about Jan Haefele. He was fun. I liked him.
When his hands weren't broken, he was a decent defenseman.
Yeah. I mean, I would defer to Eric on the Sylvain Lefebvre, Alexei Gusarov.
Yeah, I was just a little too young to really be able to pick those out.
Yeah, same.
You're muted, E.
Like I said, I'm muted myself. There was a little bit of noise next to me. Sylvain in the chat there is saying, if there was one guy, if P.W. had to pick one guy, that's what the translation is right here. He said it would be Foote. So I think we all know that, and that's coming from a Hall of Fame goalie, right? So we all know that. Now, as far as the other guys, Haefele, we loved him. We thought it was another underrated trade we made, and Jan was good at what he was good at. You know what I mean? And again, same thing. You were talking about his hands there. Like if he was going to do a little too much, then it wasn't going to work. You know what I mean? But if you're talking about meat potato guy, like meat potato shifts, he was good. Now, if I go older, for me, this guy, and I'm going to talk about Goose here, Alexei Gusarov, one of underrated guys of that '96 Cup, and I used to laugh with him all the time that he had a fake birth certificate, those Russians back then, and I told him that he played in that '72 series, and he'd laugh, but you could tell, like, and there's pictures out there. I'm telling you, we're gonna find him one day. There's pictures out there. There's a couple dudes that look like him. I'm just telling you. So we don't know how really old Goose is. We never have known how old Goose is, but he's the guy that it was so naturally gifted. He smoked a lot. There's no doubt about that. You know what I mean? Like, he loved his cigarettes. He was my stallmate. You know what I mean? And oh my Lord, at McNichols there, he was like a frequent visitor across the street, the hallway there at McNichols, and he was in the janitor's closet right there, and he smoked and read his game notes and came back in and stunk up our corner there, and But I tell you one thing, he'd show up in the summer. I don't know if he worked out or not. He said he was like 36 at the time. I bet you he was 46. And we'd be working out, and then we'd be working out all summer and going hard at it, going to Red Rocks and doing box jumps, and this guy would show up and then just skate laps around us, and we'd be like, "What is going on? I don't get it." He would just go. It's almost like he had a cigarette in his right hand, a brandy on his left hand, and skating. And we're like, what is going on here? This guy smokes like a chick. He's got no muscle. He's 100 years old, but you're talking about like just. I think he just played the play, right? You know what I mean? Like, and there was so much more. There's so much more to his game that he never even tap that potential, you know what I mean? And it was so funny because, I don't know, he was just so underrated, and he was so easy, and he was so he could play anyway, but he played mostly on the third pair, you know what I mean? But he was so smart, and you could put him on the first pair, you could put him anywhere. He was a big part of the '96 Cup. So you're talking about defensive defenseman? Yeah, this guy could read anything. Like I said, he outread you so quick on your reads, on everything. And it was so funny because, he wasn't flashy. And even you talk to people to this day, Alexei Gusarov, and they're like, I love Goose. I love Goose. He came to my wedding. I still, try to keep in touch with him. And obviously working for the Avs now. So he's an awesome dude. And on the same part, you had Sly, right? One of my good friends, Sylvain Lefebvre, now assistant coach in Florida, doing an amazing job coaching the D. But Sly was kind of the same way a little bit, but Sly was more, that was his potential. That was what he was.
Sure.
And if you remember, he was part of that big Matt Sundin trade, and you could ask a guy, if we had Gretz on the show again, you could ask him, what about Sylvain Lefebvre? He would tell you that 93 playoff series, he's like, that Sylvain Lefebvre was a pain in my butt, because Sly was so good, and he could play against top-end guys, even though in Colorado he fell more into a top four, right? Sly was simple, makes simple plays. We used to make fun of him all the time, right? When in doubt, slide it out, right? You know what I mean? They just the old flip of the ice, you know what I mean? Which you don't see a lot nowadays, But, Sly was so smart, and he was so, he talks a lot about the mental game, you know what I mean, with the young Panthers. And you talk about the reclamation projects with the Panthers, right? He's done an unbelievable job, with the Schmitz and OEL. So, yeah, those are two guys I would say were awesome.
See, this is why I could never be a defensive D. You have to be intelligent to be able to play defense in the NHL. So couldn't be me. We do need to take our first break of the show here, but then I want to change gears on this conversation a little bit. Not fully, but a little bit. Before we do, though, we are brought to you by the Bo Nix Chiller Gang. Go get yourself a Coors Light while Bo Nix tosses some TDs and choose chill. Jump in with Coors Light today. Of course, they're available pretty much every liquor store in the country. But if you want to be a true chiller sitting on your couch, you can get it delivered right to your front door thanks to CoorsLight.com/DNVR and Instacart. You don't even have to get up off your couch, and you can find the chillers on your porch. Of course, the mountains turn blue on the bottle or the can to let you know they're ice cold and ready to drink. So throw them in your fridge and get them chilled out for whatever event you're happening. It doesn't have to be a Broncos game. It can be grilling in the backyard or just hanging out with some friends, whatever you might be doing. It's always a great moment to choose chill with Coors Light. So make the most of those times you choose chill and get Coors Light delivered with CoorsLight.com/DNVR thanks to Instacart. Again, make sure you use the /DNVR to let them know we sent you over there. Please celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Once you've chosen chill and are a Bo Nix chiller, make sure you're also taking care of your finances. Maybe you're looking to get into property investing, and that's where Cake Mortgage comes into play. Honestly, you don't even have to be getting into it. Whether you own an investment property or you're thinking about buying one or you're just thinking about buying a home, Cake Mortgage has you covered. They make it easy. They don't need tax returns. They don't need W-2s, and there's no complicated paperwork. All you need is a lease agreement, or we can just use market rent prices. It's a piece of cake. Get this, even if the property's vacant or even if you just purchased it, Cake can help. Jump in with them, no problem. They can get a deal done pretty much no matter what because Cake specializes in loans for investors just like you. So call 1-800-EAT-CAKE today. That's 800-EAT-CAKE. Again, 800-EAT-CAKE to get a bigger slice of the American dream. Call now or visit cakehome.com to read their 5-star reviews and to get started. And make sure you mention DNVR. Sent you over there. Let them know. Shout them out. Cake Mortgage Corporation, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 1734623, licensed by Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions apply. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I wanted to adjust this conversation not just for best defensive D, but maybe most physical players in Avalanche history. And I don't mean guys who punched faces. I mean physical play on the ice. You're going to see a lot of crossover with similar names. Was Adam Foote the biggest hitter in the league? Maybe not. But when you got him in the corner, he was going to absolutely maul you. As opposed to someone like, obviously, Rob Blake, one of the greatest hitters of all time. Current Avs, you probably say Josh Manson is their most actively physical. You go back a handful of years, someone like a Nikita Zadorov. What makes an effective physical player? I'm using Zadorov as an example. Don't get me wrong. He could absolutely blow guys up. But maybe that intelligence factor I was talking about before the break, you would see him run himself out of position to smoke a guy on occasion. Whereas someone like Foote found ways to use that physicality in a much more effective way at times, even if it wasn't quite as flashy.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Is he unmuted?
You're still muted.
Broken mic.
Okay. Well, while he figures this out, I think that the
Thank you.
The problem with a guy like Zadorov was that, as you mentioned, he took himself out of position a lot. He played himself away from the game because he was trying to chase a big hit. And that's, I mean, you look at some of these guys, like right now, you look at Keaton Middleton. He's big, right? And he wants to use his size, but he got himself into trouble last year with way too many penalty problems because he was trying to chase, and trying to figure out that line is such an important part of being the physical presence on a defense, that it's not enough to just go and get, oh, hey, we got a guy that's big, we got a guy that likes to hit. You have to understand how to do it effectively, and it's really hard to do. That's part of what made Foote so special, was that he just, he did. He was great at it. He was such a physical presence consistently. And as somebody in chat mentions, like you look at what he did to Keith Tkachuk in the 2001 series against the Blues. Keith Tkachuk, one of the top power forwards of his era, and Adam Foote just straight up stole his lunch, ate it in front of him, and then left him with nothing. Just dismissed. Get out of here. So
that was his forte, right? That was his bread and butter. He wanted to engage in front of them. Yeah. Right? Guys don't want to engage. He wanted, and that's how he played his game. Again, if I was going to be on a different team, I would have said, leave the guy alone. Don't get involved with him. Don't engage. Leave him alone. So I feel that Foote was really good at that. Was he the best hitter? He was good at with a forearm shiver, right? You know what I mean? In the corner, he was good at that. You know what I mean? Where I think you're talking about timing yourself with a big hit. I think Rob Blake was probably the best. You know what I mean? That the Avs ever had, honestly, in the types of Zadorov, right? You know what I mean? But you're right. Blakey was never put himself out of position. Big Z probably did many times, right? So there's a little bit of, one's a Hall of Famer, one is just a good NHLer, right? There's a big difference there. But Foote was more. It was more about engaging, and it was more. He just wanted to go toe to toe with you in front of the net, which you don't see anymore because the rules are so different, right? But it was so fun to watch him back then. And like I said, if I was playing against him or coaching against him, I would have always said, just leave him alone. Leave him alone. Don't engage with him. Don't engage with him. Leave him alone. Let the big bear sleep, So that's what I would say about the difference on those guys.
I kind of had a thought as you guys were talking about that, and we've seen this in certain ways over Avs history. Not that it's anyone's fault necessarily, but in some ways, Avs fandom has been twisted into out of the norm expectations when you look at someone like the Avs had Patrick Waugh for their first 8 years of existence. So the expectations of goalies for a long time have been astronomically high in this organization. And it kind of struck me that I'm not saying that it's good enough, but for years now, we've talked about the Avs struggles in front of their own net and how they don't do a good job in that area. Is some of that some unrealistic expectations because they've had a career, an organization that has gone from Adam Foote to Rob Blake to other effective defensive Ds in a way that maybe makes people have higher expectations than are realistic? Unmute him, please, Diff.
Yeah. One of the things here is, if you look at it back then, it's like it was a staple, right? Foote was part of the core, right? It was Sakic, it was Forsberg, it was Waugh, and it was Foote. Like it or not, that was the foursome right there. That's who was considered, I can tell you that from my own man and his staff, untouchable. Those were the four untouchable ones. They weren't going anywhere. and then you just built around it, and then you let go, just like a salary cap back then. They had the internal cap, and like I've always said before, the Ricci's, the Scott Youngs, the Ozelinch, they all of a sudden they just had to go. They were starting to make too much money, right? But those guys were staying, and you're right, when you do take that away, and all of a sudden, but even in the during his prime, for example, the Avalanche drafted some guys, for example, like Robin Regeer, right? He was used on the, you're talking about a defensive defenseman. He was used on the Theo Fleury trade, right? You know what I mean? That's one of the four first rounders they had that year. I mean, does he have the same career if he stays an Av? Maybe not. You know what I mean? Because Foote was the guy there. Foote, I know as a lefty righty, but Foote was the guy that was playing the hard-nosed guy. And then Regeer goes to different pastures in Calgary, and that's how he becomes that guy. He becomes their Adam Foote, right? So, yeah, you're right. When you move on from Foote, the expectations are you're going to find some more, and you're going to find, they're hard to find. They're hard to come by. I don't think they've ever found another one of the Foote type in my book. Cale Makar, it's totally different, obviously. But Foote, like the toughness and the ability to play like Devontae's minutes, right? Important minutes. But obviously a different style than Devontae's, and it's a different game today. But yeah, I think expectations are always hard, and it was hard for young guys to come in because, hey, can you be like this guy? And it's like, not everyone can be like that. Not everyone can play that way. It's not fun. It's hard. It's hard to have guys chase you down every shift and yell at you, and you want to. It's exhausting. Well, it is. Like I know AJ laughs, but it's like, and I know that's the problem for some of the guys back then. They came in, they were playing like that, rough and tough, and then all of a sudden, after a week or two, they don't want to do it anymore because it's tough. You know what I mean? It's not fun. It's exhausting. So, but you're right, Rudo. Once you have that standard in the net, that standard, in the back end, and the standard up front with Joe and Peter, you know what I mean? Like for years, like Paul was an excellent player, never attained that. Not until probably Mac came around, right? Nathan McKinnon came around. That would be the first guy that, okay, we can compare him, but obviously if you compare them, they're neck and neck, right? Him and Joe, right? Which is so crazy. They have the same stats after their, so many games. That's kind of crazy. But so yeah, expectations have always been high in Colorado, and I do believe it was the foundation of those guys that laid it right there the first year, right? Sakic Forsberg up front, Foote on the back end, and Patty in the net. Obviously came in a little later in December, but still with that win that first year in '96, those guys set the stone, set the bar, set the standards for what each position should be like in an Avalanche uniform.
You are muted as well, because that's just
Unreal,
who we are
man.
today. We're the muted gang today.
Train wreck. You mentioned Robin Regeer as a guy that like grew and was able to have a great career as a defensive defenseman, but another guy that they traded away, it gets overlooked a little bit, was Aaron Miller, like in the Rob Blake deal. Had really like come into his own right in that area of his career was his prime. He was maximum effective. He had become a really, really good player, and it's Rob Blake, so like it's Rob Blake, but that was another guy. Like right now, I would kill to have Aaron Miller on the current Avs.
Sure. I could be sold on that. Maybe a Johnny Boychuk type too.
Yeah, Millsy was underrated. You know what I mean? And Millsy was one of those guys who was so funny that I don't think he took himself seriously. And I've never seen a guy eat so much junk food and be so lean. I've never seen a guy like that. He didn't have an ounce of fat, that guy. It was unbelievable. What an athlete. Yeah, great dude, great chemistry guy, great team guy. And, again, was able to flourish in Colorado because of the Footes and guys like that, right? For Lefebvre and Gusarov, and so he goes to LA in that trade, and he gets a bigger piece of the pie, and then had a better, when you say career, you know what I mean, in LA, because he played more important minutes. Where He was top in Colorado. He wasn't going to be above Foote. He wasn't going to be above Sly. Wasn't going to be above those guys. So yeah. That sometimes change of scenery is exactly what you need because of opportunity.
You know, personal favorite of mine, underrated guy, was Kurt Sauer. The guy that Toronto thought that they were signing, I loved Kurt Sauer. He was so solid.
Instead, they got Jeff Kurt.
That concussion, right? That concussion. Yeah, he's actually finger. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that concussion was it really slowed him down. I mean, you'll never know what it could have had as a career. Absolutely, bang on.
Maybe the most underrated archetype of player might be defensive defenseman. I do want to talk about that a little bit more, but we do need to take our second break of the show. So make sure you're getting in. Don't be Jeff Finger necessarily, but do get yourself some chicken fingers. That'll help you on that front. If you're heading out on your next summer road trip, make sure you're ordering at Raising Cane's. You can order online at raisingcanes.com or use the Cane's mobile app to satisfy your chicken finger fix in a snap. At Raising Cane's, every chicken finger is hand battered and cooked to order. Every crinkle cut fry is crispy and perfectly salted, and every piece of Texas toast is buttered to perfection. All of it made ready to be dipped in that special Raising Cane's sauce, which is made in restaurant every single day. So jump in with Raising Cane's, get the sauce that's to die for. If you're not hungry yet, I don't know what to tell you. The chicken fingers are that good over at Raising Cane's. Again, get your order in, whether it be in-store or on the app, and keep the road trip going. Raising Cane's chicken fingers, one love. Once you got your chicken finger fix satisfied, make sure you also got a good car for that road trip this summer with the official vehicle of DNVR and the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche in Toyota. Of course, Toyota has a vehicle for everyone. If you want just a daily driver, they've got sedans. If you're hauling stuff, they got trucks like the Tundra. If you got a bunch of kids to drag around, they've got SUVs like the 4Runner. Whatever it is, they've got you covered. And 17 of those vehicles have four-wheel or all-wheel drive, so you can feel safe on the roads, even in some Colorado weather, or if you like going off-road, and they've got that covered too. The best part, maybe though, at least for me, you can save a bunch of money on your daily commute with 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, including even hybrid trucks like the Tundra iForce Max. So jump in with Toyota, join the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche at your local Front Range stores, including Auto Nation Toyota Arapahoe and Centennial, Corbin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevens Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Again, Toyota, the official vehicle of us here at DNVR. Let's go places. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I do think, especially in the modern era, defensive defensemen are interesting in the way they get rated. In part because, look, we live in an era of analytics. I love analytics. Everyone loves to look at these possession numbers, and that is important. I think, objectively, you having the puck is better than your opponent having the puck. But you look at these defensive defensemen that sometimes may not have the best possession numbers. They may not have advantages in a lot of those ways. But I think sometimes people see a bad Corsi percentage and they overlook going a little bit deeper. And when you see an effective defensive defenseman, sure, maybe they give up a bunch of shots, but what percentage of those shots are quality shots? It's if your goaltender has a 98% save percentage because when this guy's on the ice, he only ever gives up low percentage shots. There's more value than I think people lead on to limiting opposition to poor quality shots is what I'm trying to say.
I think when you're talking about analytics and you just look at the like the Corsi 4 percentage, for example, as you're mentioning, when you talk about digging deeper, one of the things that I like to look at is the against per 60 rate and compare it to some of the other top guys, because usually these defensive defensemen are not driving much in the way of offense, and if they don't have a good play driving guy next to them, then
the plan is for nothing to happen on the ice.
Yeah, like your percentage, there's a decent chance that your percentage might suffer because you're not doing much offensively, but are you actually preventing things from happening defensively while you're out there? But because you're not getting play going consistently on the other end, you're defending a lot more than you would want to be, and that just inherently is going to lead to certain things, some stats piling up against you. And if that number, if the Corsi against per 60 or the shots against per 60 or the expected goals against per 60, if those on a rate basis are higher, then you go, okay, we have a problem here. But if they're kind of mid-pack, or even they look pretty good relative to some of the other guys, and the problem here in the overall percentage is what's happening on the offensive end, then you go, all right, like that's fine. Like I'm paying this guy to play defense. Now he's doing that for me. We need to go and find somebody that can help drive the play the other direction. It's why you don't want to, like, Ryan Lindgren, Josh Manson being put together was sort of something that happened out of necessity, because of the handedness and sort of just like the alignment that they ended up with there. And it ended up predictably struggling, because what that pairing didn't do well was move the puck. And naturally, what the Gerard Malinsky pairing doesn't do well is defend. So when they get put in those situations where they have to do those things, both of those pairings had struggles in that area of the ice. So when we're talking about like getting into the analytics of the defensive defenseman, it is hard. Like it's hard to quantify, and so much of the analytics that we use and the data that we pull is built around what exactly happens with the puck. And if anybody that watches a hockey game will tell you, one guy has the puck
out there. Yeah.
There are 9 skaters out there that don't have the puck at any given time. There's a lot happening away from the puck that is it's systems, it's defending, it's IQ, it's skating, it's size, it's understanding how to play the game. It's not just what's going on with the puck. And frankly, it's impossible to quantify that. You just can't. And that leaves you with, well, how good is a guy really truly at defending? Vladislav Gavrikov was a middle level defender, and then goes to Los Angeles, gets insulated, and has an unbelievable season with the Kings, where as a team they give up nothing. Gavrikov looks like he's the man, like one of the best defenders in his own zone in the entire NHL. Now he's going to go to New York, and we'll see. Everybody in New York struggled last year. So what's going to happen? Is Gavrikov really that good, or is it system based? Because there are some systems out there that greatly insulate players. We talked Victor. He's not a defenseman, but Victor Olofsson goes from Buffalo to Vegas, gets insulated by that system, puts up better defensive metrics than we've ever seen, but that's because all of that is just puck proxy. He played on a good team, had the puck a lot more than he ever had in his career, so defensive numbers looked a lot better. Did he magically get that much better defensively? No.
So
can the Avs system do something similar? That's the rub.
I've also been watching a lot of Olofsson film. Obviously, he's the new Av, so that's what we do. But one tangent off of that came to my mind as well, that is extremely hard to quantify on the defensive side. If you go look and watch Olofsson's highlights from last year, there's an all goals video out there somewhere on YouTube that I found. Watching that video, the first thought that comes to mind is, wow, he's scoring a lot of pretty easy goals. And the reason is he did a really good job of finding soft spots on the ice. He got to spots that weren't defended and then had quality teammates that could get him the puck in those situations, and he's a good enough shooter to finish. And that's where I struggle with quantifying the defensive side. How many shifts down the ice does Josh Manson cover a guy who's trying to sneak into a spot and the play never materializes in the first place? So you don't even know how good of a defensive play that really was, because it didn't happen right in front of your eyes. But if he's not there, there's a wide open guy in front of your net. So I just don't know how you even begin to quantify something like that.
You don't.
But even back then, the one difference back then was we didn't have all those fancy stats, right? But we did. But we didn't. They were called different things. They were more like chances for, chances against, and who's on the ice. And it was so hard to collect the data, right? It was a lot of work. I can tell you that I did it because that was my first year out on the coaching staff, and that's what I did. And you just go the old VHS tape to VHS tape, and trust me, it's hard. But at the end of the day, there's a pattern there. It's the same thing, right? And the pattern is, this guy, when he's on the ice, there's not a lot of chances against, right? Because of what Rudolph just said a little bit there, right? You step up on the play where all of a sudden all of a sudden he makes a play, but it's not, you can't see it, but he makes the play where all of a sudden there is no play that's made in front of the net. So, I think what you start to notice is per 60 minutes per game, is there a lot of scoring chances against, and that's what back then what we call the defensive defenseman, a meat potato guy, a sly goose, what Foote was good at. But obviously you're playing some harder minutes. Yeah, it's all relative, but also a guy like Goose or a guy like Sly, you could just flip the puck out and go. Where it's such a different game now. It's more a puck possession game than it ever has been, right? I think Detroit are the ones that kind of started that with the Russian 5. And, we weren't afraid to dump the puck. And, then we realized, like, maybe we want the puck. Maybe we're good. You know what I mean? Maybe we should have the puck. You know what I mean? And so it's always changed a little bit, where nowadays it's a little bit tougher to just be that, right? Where this guy, like some people are talking about lingering, for example, right? You just said that. Maybe they don't like those types of defensemen. You know what I mean? Because it's like, no, we want you to be able to. And that's why Sammy G for me is so valuable, because Sammy can defend, can do that, but then he moves the puck and he jumps up, right? And that's kind of what today's game is. Where back then, you could be a guy that just flipped it out. You know what I mean? And we didn't look at that like, when you flip it out, who gets it? The other team or us? You know what I mean? Where who ends up with the puck, right? It didn't matter. It's like, well, you're not giving up anything, right? And that's all that mattered. So it's a little different. But I'll tell you one thing. The game's always been the same. You got to be able to defend. And once you defend, then you don't spend time in your own end, and that's your best offense. I agree with that. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's why Cale McCarr unicorn, and that's why, as much as people wanted to say that Sandis Ozolinsh was not good defensively, which I mean, I'm not going to argue that, but yeah,
come on.
But usually when you're on the ice, you're on the offensive zone, so it's all good.
There's obviously everything in hockey is complicated, but when you talk about a guy like Ozolinsh, especially, that defensive ability almost matters more on the coach's deployment than anything, right? Your defensive zone face-off late in the game, Sandis Ozolinsh isn't going out there to take that face-off. Like, be real for a second. Compared to you're late in the game and you need a goal, yeah, guess what? You're not going to put Jan Hejda out there for that face-off. Like, situations matter based on the coaching staff decisions on who they want playing what roles on a team at any given time as well, which I did want to jump to another topic. Unfortunately, Footer had to reschedule with us because being a head coach in the NHL is a 24/7 job as it goes. It's hard work out there, but we will get to talk to him this weekend, hopefully. But him not being here gives me the opportunity to bring this up. Was something in the water with Avs 1.0? When you look through this, look, I know when you're a hockey player in the NHL, you making a career out of hockey beyond your playing career is normal. But when you look at someone like a Cogliano who moves into, yes, a front office role, but it's an advisory role, or you look at guys who become scouts like he did, and then he made the smart decision and moved into media. But you look at Avs 1.0, Joe Sakic, a GM in the NHL. Patrick Waugh, multiple time head coach in the NHL. Adam Foote, now a head coach in the NHL. Chris Drury, GM in the NHL. Even someone like Peter Forsberg was a GM in the Swedish league with Modo after his career. What Blake about this Avs? Yeah, Blake just stepped down from GM in LA. What about that Avs 1.0 era made so many successful front office or bench bosses?
Well, and one guy you're forgetting too, and we tend to forget him out of a little bit. Keith Jones, president of the Flyers.
Yeah,
right.
True.
I mean,
true.
Yeah, Jonesy was. I mean, he's like me. We came in like right after me, so we missed the '96 one. But he was there for a few years, and I'll tell you one thing. This is what I'm thinking. I think these guys had so much fun. You know what I mean? Because it was so bad. You know what I mean? We talked about it the other day. It was so bad in Quebec. You know what I mean? And they had so much fun winning. And that decade of hockey is unbelievable. It's one of the best decades of hockey. It is. And I know I'll speak on behalf of my dad here. Like, that's one of his biggest, like, proud moments of, it was that decade. It was every year. It was every game. And it was built on those guys, if you look at it, you just said some names. Well, let's go back to what I just said earlier. What the core four was: Sakic, okay, there he is. Forsberg, like you said, he's he did that part a little bit in Moto, that right, owner GM. Yeah. Then you got Patty Waugh, owner GM in Quebec all those years on the Ramparts, and then obviously whatever you want to call the title in hockey ops with head coaching job and still a head coach, and Foote now a head coach. Like you said, those guys had so much fun. They had so much fun winning, and they had so much fun scheming together with my dad and his staff. And it was always about what can we do next? How do we get there? What are we going to do? Do we need freshness? The Korea Solani experiment. These guys were all in on it too. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, like, they had so much fun. And I think that when you experience winning and when you experience the highs that they've had as a group, I think it's just nothing short of, and again, it's not a money thing. Those guys all made money. They made a lot of money. So I think it's just that they love the game. And I think that the game brought them so much and so much joy. You know what I mean? And I think that now you can get back at it. So now I think what's extraordinary is Joe's done it as a manager and as a player, right? There's not many in the history of the league. I don't know what the stat is, but there's not many. It's a rare feat. And from the Drees of the world too, you know what I mean? Other guys like that, and Blakey, that were big parts of those, jumped in with those core four guys. Ray Bork could have been a guy that would have been good too in management, in Boston. If it, obviously Neely was the guy that took over, but I'm just saying those guys had such great hockey minds, that Mike Keane has been in development forever with the Winnipeg Jets, right? I mean, there's a lot of guys from that era that are working in the NHL because they love it, and like you said, what was in that water, I don't know. But it was an old building at McNichols, so maybe there was something weird in there. I don't know. I'm not throwing blaming anyone, but you never know, babe. But it's pretty amazing. It's just like the Hartford Whalers too. There's so many of those guys that are coaches in the NHL. It's kind of weird. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Deneen, Kenville, Samuelson. I mean, Dean Evison. The list goes on. It's nuts. Ron Francis. Kind of crazy, but I don't know what it was, but I think these guys, it's such a different era too compared to nowadays. When those guys got on the bus, on the plane, it was funny because they just got together and then maybe cracked open a couple of beers, and then it's so different. Now they get on their phones, and you know what I mean? And it's just today's generation. It's just different. But back then, the guys just figured out schemes. How do we fix this power play? How do we go about this? And the napkins would go out and the dry erase boards, and then you just kind of going, it's so different. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying one era is better than the other. I'm saying that at that time, those guys they learned to communicate, learned to, kind of do it like that. And maybe that's why they're trying to translate it in their after career. But it's pretty amazing to see all the Avs guys in front offices in the NHL right now. It's nuts.
Yep.
I mean, you mentioned Lefebvre is an assistant in the NHL.
Yeah.
Alex Tangay's been an assistant for a while. I mean, we just had Dan Heinout leave, and
Yep.
he's been an assistant. Like,
And
it's a really, what's that?
Edgy's jumping in, and
yeah. I mean, it's just a really deep pool. Like, you go through those rosters, and you're like, that guy, like there's maybe as many guys with jobs in the league as not now.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the actual math, but it's got to be close.
Don't do math live on air.
Yeah, I've made that mistake many, many times. We'll avoid it this time. I'm not going to pretend like I follow careers of players on other teams past their retirement closely the way we do with the Avs, but it does seem like there's just an abnormal number with Colorado. Not that there's Shanahan, Yzerman, all even a Chelios has had careers if you're looking at someone like the Wings, but it feels like there's just so many that come out of Colorado. Even, beyond that era, Andrew Brunette, head coaching in Nashville. You year after year, it feels like more and more Avs players. Is that just an organization? Yeah, Peter Budaj has been a goalie coach forever. is this an organization that targets intelligent players? Is that what I'm learning from this? Intelligent players make good coaches and front office members?
Well, here's what I'll say. He's talking about passion there. He's right. First of all, remember I said that the other day, you don't win without emotional, like guys that bring emotions to the game, right? So you got to have a passion for the game. If you don't have a passion for the game, you're not winning as a player, right? So I think it translates into the post-career. But, yeah, I do believe that there's so many guys, and because the Avalanche have been a winning franchise, I do believe that. People want winners. People want to associate themselves with winners. They want winners. They want to build their front office. They want to build their player pool with guys that have won. I always say if you win a cup as a player, it adds 5 years to your career. I'm telling you it does. Nico Sturm's a good little example right there. Might have been out of the you win a cup. It adds 5 years to your career. And do the math. Look at every year on teams. People want winners. And it's life. It's hockey. And I do believe that the Avalanche, with that 1.0, and of course now the 2.0, they've had unbelievable decades of hockey. And I think what it does is it translates, and guys find jobs in the post-career because of that, because they've won. They've been there. Look at Sly now. He's won more as an assistant coach last 2 years with 2 cups, where he only won 1 in '96 with, you know what I mean? But now you're doing the math, and you've had 3 cups. It's crazy. You know what I mean? It's kind of like back then. All the assistant coach from the Avs. You know, from Joel Quenneville to Jacques Martin to Brian Trottier. The list way it just went on. Like, it was like, why? Because they'd won, and people wanted them. You know what I mean? And that's how it works. Jacques hadn't won, but I'm just saying, all the other guys, that's kind of why it happened that way. So I do believe being a winner is a big thing. It's a big tag you get. You know what I mean? Like, the worst thing you can do as a player is you go in there and you're tagged as an AHLer. That's a tough tag to have. But the best tag to have is to be tagged as a winner. You'll just keep playing. You'll just keep playing, keep getting jobs. And now, you know what? I got no problem with that. I've never won. Maybe that would have added 5 years to my career. I know, and I do believe it would have. And that's just the way it is. I didn't win. So it is what it is, and it's tough to win. And I think you should be rewarded when you win.
Yeah, obviously I think the winner tag helps, but it also far from guarantees success in that next step, right? Like, we've seen plenty of players. Wayne Gretzky, horrible NHL head coach, absolute disaster. Just because you're a great player, just because you've won, doesn't mean you're ready to take that next step. And maybe there's a right role for people, right? Sakic didn't become a coach. He became a GM. And obviously that's worked out very successfully. You leave the coaching to maybe, this is more personal opinion than anything, but it is often hard for those elite players to become head coaches because there's not as much of a, let me break this down and show you how to do this. When you're that good, you just go out on the ice and you do the thing and it works. So how do you translate that knowledge to a hockey team, right? It's
100%. And it's also, it's like a goalie, Patty. You see the game so differently. You see it from the back. You see everything in front of you. It's so different. And Patty was a guy that always had the clipboard out, right? You go in PP meetings, power play meetings, PK meetings. He oftentimes would lead the meetings. Not that it's a down thing for the coaches or anything. It was more like, no, this is what I think we should do. And the involvement of the guys was so much different than it is today. And again, it's hard for me to compare today because I'm not in the locker room. But I'm assuming some guys like Devon Tays or whatever will probably take over, you know what I mean, on meetings and say, hey, listen, this is what I think we should do. Mike Keane ran meetings. Mike Keane ran the PK. Now it was his baby. Now he was the coach. He was the captain of the PK. So I do believe that you're right. High-end guys, sometimes it's hard for them to relate to fourth-line plugs. You know what I mean? And it just is. You know what I mean? And in a nice way. They don't think that way. And but I think that if you're passionate about the game, and again, even a guy like Alex Tanguay, it's rare you see a skilled guy like that, and I think he's doing a great job. You know what I mean? Like as an assistant coach, and being out there and talking about power play and different kind of things. Where you see more is more the defensive defensemen or even the tough guys and guys like that around the league that become head coaches because I think they can relate to the rest of the team better than superstars. We all want to be superstars, but there's usually only one or two, right? We're just lucky here in Colorado. There's multiple.
Yeah, I mean, it's how many organizations can say they've had the number of superstars the Avs have had. There's for few, but not many. There's a lot of organizations like Columbus whose best player ever is probably Rick Nash.
Yeah, a great player.
Yep. But nowhere near the levels of, yeah. The Avs have Sakic, Forsberg, McKinnon, Waugh.
Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky was sort of an era that they fumbled. So
I guess that's fair.
Well, maybe
there's at least
don't build around wings. Don't build around wings.
I'll give my dad some props too. Maybe that's why his number is retired too. You know what I mean? Because
absolutely.
You knew who to keep, right? And you just said Bobrovsky, Panarin, and I'm not throwing dagger. I'm just saying sometimes you do make those mistakes. You keep the wrong people, and I can tell you that the Avalanche / the Nordiques, they had to make decisions on who they were going to keep, and I can tell you 100% right now they kept the right people, and that's why they had that decade of hockey. Well, because they couldn't have kept.
Not to hijack the conversation, but my next trade tree might be about the Avs not keeping the right guy. So we'll see.
Yeah. Why not?
Yes, it's the Ryan O'Reilly trade tree. For the record.
Yeah, this sounds like O'Reilly.
I wasn't there anymore. I would have never traded him.
It all worked out in the end for the Avs, at least, and O'Reilly too. O'Reilly got his cup. He can't be mad.
Absolutely. And he'll be back here in a few. Yeah. He'll be back.
We're all down. We're all down for that conversation.
Water under the bridge.
A couple minutes left here. We're winding down the show, but I am curious who, if you had to pick an under the radar defenseman in Avalanche history, one that was solid, that they're never going to get the praise of the Adam Footes. They're not flashy, even like a Nikita Zadorov. Who's a defenseman that just went out there, maybe in the middle of the lineup, and just did his job night in and night out, that maybe flies under the radar for a lot of fans?
I got one, but I'll let you go.
I already burned it when I said Kurt Sauer.
True.
Because Kurt Sauer.
Yep. Fair enough. No argument.
Fair enough. I like Kurt. Nice guy. You're right. The concussion's kind of slowing him down, but I'm going to give you one, right? Yeah. I'm going to give you one. I go deeper. I always do. You know that. 1.0. Mr. John Clem. That would be my guy.
Yeah.
Clemmer was awesome. And Clemmer was even able to pitch in a freaking wing. You know what I mean? Like he never played forward ever. And then all of a sudden he's playing forward in the National Hockey League, kind of like Eric Messier. But Clemmer was awesome. And then again, he signs that big deal in Chicago. And then next thing you know, it's too much. He's not a top pair guy. You know what I mean? Because he just wasn't. He was well isolated. He was perfect for what he was. Great team guy. Defenseman, smart. But that's what you are. And then I think he went somewhere in the contract, probably didn't follow with what the ability was. But again, good on him because he's an awesome dude and what a great player too. I'm not saying that. But he was not a top-end guy. But my answer to your question, underrated, and like John Clem, 100%. John Clem.
Yeah, I think Clem's a good answer. I'll take a weird one here. This was a guy. No. Ryan Graves is the opposite. Ryan Graves is a guy who
haters.
Grew off of me the longer he was here.
Ryan Graves was rock solid while he was here. He has had the one moment that we all have nightmares about. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
To me, it was the guy who was Ryan Graves before Ryan Graves was Ryan Graves.
Nick Holden?
Yep. Guy who he grew on me. He was only here for like 3 years, I think, but slowly but surely, that was a guy who I really grew to like his game a lot as his time in Colorado came. through.
That
He was
dude
always going to be behind guys, but
to sneak into that back door down below.
Yep.
Just wait for everybody to ignore him, and then he would just creep on down there. I'm like, how does a guy that is 6'4" become invisible?
This sneaky.
Like, it was incredible to watch that guy just like make himself just like Nightcrawler, just joop joop, and all of a sudden he's at the back, and you're like, what did he score, like 10 goals that year? It was so strange, man. He was a delight, and I've said this a few times, but one of my absolute favorite humans.
Yeah. Also, was one of Patrick Waugh's best D when he got traded, apparently. A different story for a different day. As we are out of time, as you saw the overtime there, we are just going to wrap up the show today, but we appreciate everyone hanging out. Keep your eyes peeled. I don't know if we'll have the content ready until next week, but the Foote interview will be coming. We'll have an interview with a bunch of other guys with the Avalanche alumni. So some cool stuff on the way. That trade tree will be coming too. If you haven't read AJ's piece on Victor Olofsson, make sure you go read that over at thednvr.com too. He breaks down a whole bunch of good stuff in there. So we appreciate y'all. We will be back tomorrow. This has been the DNVR Avalanche Podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.